Netflix just announced that they signed Dave Chappelle for 4 more specials, and the SJWs are losing it. Okay, before we get started, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe, because we're just going to jump right into this. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Netflix just announced that Dave Chappelle is going to be hosting and producing 4 new specials where he's going to be introducing us to some of his friends. Donnell Rawlings is one of them. Earthquake is going to be the first one. I think that premieres February 28th. And the thing about this is I'm so happy that it's happening, just like I'm happy that Spotify stood by Joe Rogan, because it's just a matter of Netflix and Spotify saying money talks and bullshit walks. And that's what the thing is. A lot of these people that are complaining about the specials aren't really the consumers anyway. And I always tell you guys, you can't cancel what you don't subscribe to. So when these people that don't really invest in any of the things that they're protesting say that they're going to pull their support, it's like, really, what are you going to pull? Are you just going to be online on Twitter all day? I get it. You don't have lives, and that's what you want to do with your time, is just make sure that Dave Chappelle doesn't get to say what he wants to say, when really the only thing that Dave Chappelle did that really pissed off the people that are ridiculously overzealous about LGBT and all that stuff is after he's done saying it, he's like, I don't care what you think about it. And that will piss people off the most. Like when he said that he was a TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist is what that stands for. The reason that pissed everybody off so much is because for at least 5 years now, that has been the big charge that they'll level at anybody that doesn't go with the narrative when it comes to trans women being the same as biological women. Then all of a sudden they're considered a TERF. And that's really been a very strong way of getting people to bow down and do what they're supposed to do. Because once you call them a TERF, then they're supposed to be like, I'm not a TERF. And then they're supposed to try to prove to you that they're not a TERF. And that was the same thing they were trying to do with J.K. Rowling, who he was referring to when he said that. They were trying to say that J.K. Rowling was a TERF or is a TERF. And by Dave Chappelle just saying like, okay, then I'm a TERF, and then not taking it back, it pissed them off more than anything. Which I'm a gay man. The point of view I come at it from is, as a gay man, is Dave Chappelle doing anything to hurt the gay community, the LGBT community?
You already know, sis.
The answer to that is no, he's honestly not. Now, if you can show me a correlation between Dave Chappelle's jokes and violence against trans people,
I don't have to.
I'm willing to hear it. But the truth is, nobody's going to give that because it's not an actual thing. Nobody's watching Dave Chappelle's specials and being like, I should go commit violence against trans people. And I know people would try to make it deeper than that, but it's really not deeper than that. So I am glad that these corporations are standing up to these people that are trying to make a big deal out of things that really aren't a big deal. You know, there's been a debate about what comedy is, and I will tell you, I am an actual stand-up comic. Maybe you all haven't heard of me before this video, but I am in these comedy streets, and there's been a lot of debate lately by people who don't do stand-up comedy, by people who've maybe done one open mic and now consider themselves comics, or people that did a couple of open mics back in the day now are inactive and still consider themselves comics, or people that do stand-up comedy but don't actually get laughs. I see the names on a lot of the things when they do like think pieces and blogs about stand-up comedy, and it'll say this person is a comedian in Los Angeles, and I was on LA scene for 14 years. A lot of times I'll look at those names and I'll be like, yeah, that person was not funny. That person did not actually do stand-up comedy, because that is what people are tired of with stand-up comedy, is people that just say things you agree with and your arms get tired because you're just clapping because yeah, you agree with what they say, but it isn't necessarily funny. And that's not what comedy is. The big secret to comedy, what comedy is comedy is being funny. Comedy is getting people to look at things in a particular way and saying ha ha at the end. And that's as basic as it is. It's not our job to speak truth to power, even though sometimes we do that. It's not our job to be the moral police, even though there are some people that call themselves comics that do that. But real comedians, what they're trying to do is make you laugh. And they're trying to do that by using their perspective, by using their point of view. And for me as a comedian, there's nothing I like more than listening to another comedian that has thoughts and ideas that are completely different from my own, and having them actually make me laugh at stuff that I don't agree with. To me, That is the art of stand-up comedy. It really is making people see things from your perspective, even for just a second, and maybe not being like, I agree with that point of view, but I find the way that they painted that picture to be very funny, and then laughing. I am so tired of watching stand-up comedy shows or going to stand-up comedy shows that in some cases I was a part of, and seeing people just go up, comedian after comedian, nobody laughing at anything they said, it being very uncomfortable in the room, sometimes the comedian blaming the audience for not laughing at them and trying to use whatever the identity politics they're hiding behind. Because a lot of times, one time I was at a show and there was this girl that hadn't done well. Everybody else had done well except for this girl. And there were other women on the show, and what happened was she goes up, doesn't do well, and then is like, well, I know there's a woman on stage, so you all feel like you don't have to listen now. And it's like, no, bitch, that's not the reason. It was a hot show. You were the only lull in the show, and it's because you started trying to push some feminist stuff, which if you do feminist stuff, do feminist stuff. But make sure that it's funny feminist stuff, because nobody just wants to hear your opinion. So you're just mad right now because you just weren't hitting with the audience. So accept that. And when it comes to Dave Chappelle's specials that he's going to be putting on, the comics that he's going to be putting on have been in stand-up. The first two that he announced, which is Donnell Rawlings and Earthquake. Earthquake I worked with for Roast of America, which if you want, I'll put a link in a pinned comment below so you can check out that, get an idea of what it is I do and what it is I talk about. And that should give you an idea right there. I voted for Donald Trump, and that was not at all popular in LA. I was living in LA at the time, and I still would do really well. I still would get laughs. I still would get booked on shows. So if you know anything about LA, completely to the left, I shouldn't have gotten laughs there. But people would laugh at the stuff that I said, not because they agreed with me, but because I was actually doing stand-up. So when it comes to this like particular thinking of like Dave Chappelle shouldn't have a voice because he says things you don't like, well, get used to it. People in the world say things you don't like. There are people that don't necessarily agree with everything you say, and they're not necessarily going to represent you. Why? Because they're not meant to represent you. Dave Chappelle is a black man, and that's his experience, and that was his experience growing up. So to expect that he's going to think the same as you when you're an SJW, which in a lot of cases SJWs are white, there are certain tokens and there are people of color that do join those movements and want to identify with that, and I don't know why, but there are, but the majority are usually white. So how can you expect a black man that hasn't lived the same white life that you've lived to have the same opinion you have or necessarily represent you? A lot of times when SJWs say that they want representation from people of color, they don't mean they want to hear the opinions of people of color. What they want is people that look like me but still think like them. And if a person of color doesn't go with that, suddenly they're not a good person of color and they don't deserve to be heard. So I am very happy that Dave Chappelle is going to be hosting and producing. So hosting, he will appear in these specials, hosting and producing these 4 specials for Netflix. I think Netflix made the right move, and I might even stop using my best friend's password and pay for my own Netflix again. I said might. Anyway, let me know what you think down below in the comments. Comment, like, and subscribe. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.